You know, when lawmakers wrote up bills to be considered, or write up bills to be considered during a legislative session, there's the legislative law lingo of the actual bill that we all know about. And then there's also the statement of purpose, which makes it easier for people like us to digest. It's the statement of purpose, which is a basic explanation of what the bill will do and why it needs to be done. Last session, House Bill 340's statement of purpose explained the changes to the voter identification rules. The second sentence reads like this. Currently, there are inconsistencies among the various methods of registering, as well as a lack of clarity concerning the type of documentation an applicant must show to prove residence in order to complete registration, end quote. The goal was to clear up some confusion and get rid of anything that might cause some worry of voter fraud. Crux of House Bill 340 was to get rid of the student ID cards as a proof of that identity because of what they see as a lack of uniformity in their sophistication, talking about the IDs. And you can see it, they literally just crossed it out in the bill and got rid of student IDs as a valid form of proof when it comes to registration. And that law went into effect July 1st. But clearing up any inconsistencies or confusion wasn't exactly achieved with this law, at least when it comes to next week's election, because Chapter 11 of Idaho Code 34, as it explains conduct of elections, again, based on what was changed last legislative session, it still includes, quote, a current student identification card from a high school or institution of higher education as a valid form of ID at the polls. That's still allowed, at least until January 1st, 2024. So there's a little bit left to be explained to clear up any confusion and inconsistencies. Well, there's even some confusion caused by what's on the Secretary of State's website. What counts for registering versus what's allowed for voting? Seems like a good time to visit with Idaho's Secretary of State. So Joe Paris did.
Cities and counties across Idaho are set for the November 7th election. Mark your calendars. With recent changes to voter ID laws, there are questions about what ID you can use and how to register to vote. Some pointed to the Secretary of State's website as a spot for some possible confusion, so let's set it straight.
There was some confusion in terms of how it was laid out. There are different requirements to register to vote, just slightly than there are requirements to vote. So we've clarified on the website, just saying it should be an Idaho driver's license, passport, or any of the others that I mentioned. But I think that's where, I don't know that there's actually confusion, but I think we've got that fixed.
An intricacy in the law centers on student IDs.
Can you use a student ID next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday, if you're already registered to vote, you can use your student ID to show up and vote. This will actually be the last election that's the case. Beginning January 1st, student IDs will no longer be accepted as a form of ID for voting. So that change is coming. And also, if you're a student and you don't have a driver's license, passport, or one of the other forms of ID, the free ID is also available to students.
If you are not registered to vote already, you can still do that at the polls on Election Day in Idaho. But to do that, you can't use a student ID.
You cannot use a student ID to register to vote, but you can use it for voting. Honestly, from our perspective, this is also very confusing for us and the poll workers, just having two different forms in terms of what the ID requirements are to register versus vote. The new laws do try to make those harmonious so that they will be the same in terms of identification requirements.
So to register, you need an approved photo ID. Idaho's driver's license or a state ID card, U.S. passport, tribal ID card, or a concealed weapons license by a county sheriff in Idaho. You also need proof of residence documents, which the easiest way is to have any of the photo IDs we just mentioned with the correct address on it. But here are some others that you can use as well, and you likely have one of these laying around the house if you need it. Another word being keyed in on those who say they're confused is the word current ID for voting and registration.
Some people were asking about whether it needs to be current or not. One of the big things is we don't actually see people using non-current driver's licenses to try and register to vote, or to vote for that matter. Most people, when their license expires, go and update it. So we don't see issues with that. If you show your driver's license when you show up to vote, it will be accepted by the poll workers or be recognized by the electronic poll books that are used at the polls.
So I asked Secretary McGrain about the usage of driver's license for voter ID, and he told me that in November 2022, our last major election, it was more than 98%. So Brian, when people are going to the polls, they're using their driver's license, and there are conversations to be had about student ID, and that's wrapped up in the courts right now, but yes, there's your answers.
Is signing an affidavit still allowed?
Okay, so you can sign the affidavit if you are already registered to vote. When you sign the affidavit, you're swearing you are who you say you are. You can't sign an affidavit and just show up to register. Okay. So be prepared to register at the polls with the documents. You can always check ktvb.com.
Student ID still used at this election?
Just for voter ID, yes.
Just for voter ID, just to be clear. Thanks, Joe.